Well, as Christians, we know that all good gifts, including the freedoms that we have, come from God, spiritual blessings and material blessings. We also know that freedom and liberty come to us through the tangible sacrifices of men and women to whom we owe a great deal of gratitude. Tom Soleo has written much about these sacrifices. He's authored or co-authored 6 nonfiction military books about heroes of America's post-9/11 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Tom is a contributing senior editor of The Stream and a recipient of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation's General Oliver P. Smith Award for Distinguished Reporting. Tom, welcome to the Stand Radio.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Now, you've devoted much of your professional life to writing about our military heroes. Why is it important for you to tell those stories?
Well, as a civilian who's never put on the uniform, I feel like if there's anything I can do to thank and support the brave men and women who, through generations have volunteered or been drafted into military service. Now we, of course, have an all-volunteer military service. And I just felt like if I could help tell these stories of these heroes and their families as well, then it's my duty as an American to do everything I can to support them while they keep us safe.
As you look at the cultural landscape today, Tom, where do you think we are as a nation in our zeal to remember those who've given their lives for our nation?
Well, I think if you ask almost any American, they will say they honor and support the military. But I think as a country, again, with an all-volunteer force deploying around the world at a moment's notice, deployed in some places that we're not even aware that our military is serving, I think that we need to go a little further than that. I think we need to pay closer attention to what's going on in places like Iraq and Syria, where a lot of Americans don't realize we still have troops in harm's way. As some of you might know, they've been taking incoming fire, particularly since the October 7th Hamas massacre in Israel. And we even had some service members killed in Jordan. And we all know what's going on in Europe with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have 100,000 brave men and women separated from their families on that continent, where a conventional or even a nuclear conflict could break out at any moment. So I think we as Americans, especially on holidays like Memorial Day, need to really think about the sacrifices that these troops and their loved ones, wives, husbands, children, parents, everybody makes to support that service member who's deployed. And also our veterans, we need to think about them as well and give them all the support they need once they get home from keeping our country safe.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the families, because in your writing, you've dealt a lot with families, and you've sat down with loved ones and you've interviewed them. Can you give us a sense of what military families have to deal with when they lose a loved one in the defense of our nation?
Well, of course, it's unimaginable for any civilian. And I've spent hours and hours, days and days, weeks and weeks talking to people who have lost loved ones in war. And, whenever I do speak with a Gold Star family member, I always leave my assumptions at the door. Just because I spoke to another grieving wife or sibling or spouse doesn't mean that this one will feel the same way. Mm-hmm. I've seen every range of emotion that there is, but the one thing I think we could say about our Gold Star family members is that they're national treasures, and they have made the greatest sacrifice that any American could ever make in losing a loved one to war, especially the parents who've lost children.
Tom, it seems to me one of the most painful things must be the anonymity of it all, because they have given a treasure that is theirs. But the average man and woman on the streets of America will not know the name of that soldier. How do they deal with the anonymity of being a Gold Star family?
Well, it's interesting because some Gold Star family members, actually the majority that I've spoken to, they use their loved ones loss as a way to help others. They want to
Okay.
tell the story, and they want to help other Gold Star family members, which is incredible. There are also some Gold Star family members who prefer the anonymity, and they wish to grieve in silence and in prayer. And of course, we should all respect that. So again, it's so hard to imagine that void being in your life, and then the political component as well, where people are debating, well, was the war worth it, yada yada
Yeah.
yada. And whenever I speak to a Gold Star family member, they talk about what their loved one wanted to do, which is keep people safe and save lives. So in that context, whether a war was quote unquote right or wrong doesn't matter, because they did it for the noblest reason that anybody could want to do anything. It's to save lives.
Mm. When I read things that you've written, there seems to be a special drive that these heroes have to serve and to defend. Tom, would you say that's a calling in their life?
Yes, I think so. I would never want to, speak on behalf of the military community, as I haven't served myself. But I know from, the veterans that I know and the active duty troops that I've spoken to as well, that, whether it's for, a specific reason, it to me, usually the answer I hear the most is, I just want to help others. And of course, you don't have to serve in the military to help others. There's all kinds of people out there doing incredible things on a daily basis. But I think what's special about the military is that selfless component. About once you're, serving in the military, it's not just about you, it's about the man or woman next to you. Again, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I've never met a service member or veteran who wasn't willing to lay down his or her life for the person standing next to them.
Tom, you were the recipient of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation's General Oliver P. Smith Award for Distinguished Reporting, based on an article called The Protector. Can you tell us about the Marine who lost his life back in 2015 that you wrote about?
Yes, absolutely. His name was Lance Corporal Squire Skip Wells, and he was from Marietta, Georgia, where I lived at the time. I since moved to Florida, but he was among the Marines killed in a shooting at a recruiting center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. There were 4 U.S. Marines murdered in that attack. And his high school was right up the street from where I lived at the time. And I heard there was going to be a, remembrance ceremony to honor him. And when I showed up that day, I was looking for, an auditorium or something, but then I looked toward the football stadium, and, this is Georgia. This is a big, football area. And so it's a big football stadium, even for a high school. And the entire place was packed. The bleachers were packed. There were balloons flying. There were, balloons in the air. There was a military flyover, and everyone just kind of got up and spoke about, this young man who was only 21 years old. And, he's just starting out his military career. He was working at the recruiting center, trying to, find other brave Marines like himself to serve, and was senselessly murdered. And I just wanted to go there to learn more about this young man, who was from the community I was living in, the community where my daughter had just been born, and say thanks. And I was able to connect with his mom a few years after that. And so that was very special. And as I told her, that award that I received for the article was not my award. That was for her son and for her whole family.
Well, it's a great article. We'll put a link to that on our podcast page. Your latest book is entitled I Have Your Back, How an American Soldier Became an International Hero. And that's coming out in June, I believe June 4th. Can you give us a taste of what that book is about?
Yes, thank you very much. I Have Your Back is about Staff Sergeant Michael Ollis. He was from Staten Island, New York. He was just a boy when New York City and our country was attacked on September 11th, 2001. And he'd already been thinking about joining the Army, even at a young age. He had been thinking about it because his dad was and is a Vietnam War hero. So, he had grown up in a military family. And as soon as 9/11 happened, that was it. He knew he would be going into the Army. So that's what he did. And 9/11 was always in his mind. I even found some sketches of Ground Zero that he had made as a child, and then, essays he had written about, why he felt it was his obligation to serve. So basically, he joined at age 17, and for the next 7 years, Mike was either training or deploying. So his entire adult life, he was defending freedom. He went to Afghanistan twice. He went to Iraq once. And it was on his final deployment to Afghanistan where Mike was in the middle of a massive Taliban assault on a forward operating base called Ghazni. And while he was out on the battlefield, the first thing he did was make sure all of his soldiers were safe. And then Mike went out by himself with minimal ammunition, just to see if he could help the others who were trying to repel the attack. And it was during those frantic moments where he linked up with a Polish soldier named Karol Karpisha. Mm-hmm. And, in so many words, Carol didn't speak English, but in so many words, Mike told him he would have his back. And only a few moments later, that happened because a suicide bomber was charging toward Carol. And Mike made the decision in a split second, but it was instinct for him based on everything he had done leading up to that moment. He stopped that suicide bomber in his path, began firing, and lost his life in the process to save the Polish soldier he had only met moments earlier. So, it's really a story about, bravery and sacrifice, of course, and, somebody who spent his entire adult life in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, but it also underscores that bond between America and its allies, that, an American soldier who had only been to Poland once in his life while, on vacation from a training operation, was willing to lay down his life for a foreign soldier. And for that heroism, Mike subsequently posthumously received the highest award that any foreign service member could ever receive from Poland. So he's not just a hero in the United States, he's a hero in Poland. And that's really what I Have Your Back is all about, is that selflessness and that sacrifice.
Tom, what do you think that military families want the rest of us to know and to remember on Memorial Day?
I think Memorial Day is about honoring the men and women who have come before all of us and have laid the foundation for this flawed but great country that we live in. There's no better place in the world. I will say that for sure. And that's because of generations of these brave men and women who basically said, I'll go so you don't have to. I'll go to keep my family safe. I'll go to keep your family safe. And I think learning the stories of these heroes is the best thing we can do for Gold Star families. I think that's what means the most to any Gold Star family member that I've ever met, is that people care, that they haven't forgotten, and that they're willing to, even if it's just a few minutes, just learn about, a fallen hero from your community or from somewhere else. Go to your local veterans cemetery. It doesn't have to be Arlington National Cemetery. But if you live near there, certainly go. And just walk around and look at the names and then do a Google search on who they were. I had actually led to a book that I wrote called Be Bold. I just saw a headstone at Arlington. It had an inscription that said, "Be bold, be brief, be gone." And, years later, I was writing a book about Major Megan McClung, who was the highest ranking female Marine to be killed during the Iraq War. So I think making the effort to learn about these brave men and women is the best way you could honor Gold Star families this Memorial Day.
You can find out more about Tom Soleo and the 6 books that he's written at thestream.org, or his books are available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Tom, thanks so much for using your life's work to help us remember.
It's a privilege. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having me on, and I hope everyone has a great Memorial Day.